thought I did what's right. I thought I had the answers. I thought I chose the surest road, but that road's brought me here. So I put up a fight and told you how to help me. Just when I had given up, the truth is coming clear.
Experience of thinking we know better. Who among us has come to our knees a time or two saying, okay, all right, I get it, show me. Or the other version of that prayer is, I give up. Anybody ever prayed that prayer? That was a great song. It also ties in with the scripture that we're referencing today. Red's an exciting color, yes. Other than black and white, it is the color in my wardrobe. And somebody commented this morning on red, and I wore red. I love red. It's exciting, and when I feel excited, I like to wear red, and I'm excited about talking about gratitude. By the way, Gladys, I have a question for you, or maybe Nina. What does the word supernal mean? You think? Truly prospered by God's loving thought divine, wealth supernal, life eternal. Anybody know what supernal? Somebody Google that. Because, yeah, like infinite. That was what came to me.
Relating to the sky or the heavens. Celestial.
What was the first word? Relating.
Or the heavens.
Infinite. We could just make that simple and say infinite. Okay. Whew, I had to know that before I left here today. And you're welcome, Susan. I mean, every time you say that word, it's like, what? I thought they made it up too. Yeah. Let's all work that into a sentence. We may be able to do that in the discussion group after. So, getting on a roll here, we're on the third piece of what I believe are the 4 key principles in prosperity. And the reason that I believe they are the 4 key principles in prosperity is because getting and learning and living each of these principles was what brought me to the next step. And ultimately, with all 4 in place, it was what brought me to a true consciousness of living prosperously. And when we talk about living prosperously, we're talking about all areas of life, yes? We're talking about our health and well-being, our wholeness. We're talking about our spiritual well-being, certainly, our career or creative expression, our finance, and there's one more, relationships. So Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, one of his definitions of prosperity is this: spiritual prosperity is founded on the inexhaustible, on the understanding of the inexhaustible, omnipresent substance of spirit as the source of supply. Spiritual prosperity is founded on the understanding of the supernal, omnipresent substance of spirit as the source of supply. I was the first one to work it into a sentence, but I do have the advantage here. So, substance is the core ingredient of supply, right? So, in order to work with substance, we need to know what it is. And we covered this in depth in our first week in the series. Substance is the invisible ether, the invisible energy in which we swim right at this moment. Substance is that out of which comes everything that we can see, touch, taste, feel, hear, It all comes out of substance. And a big part of our living prosperously is understanding it's at hand, the kingdom is at hand, we're swimming in it, and how from our consciousness to bring that into shape and form, to bring it manifest. So get this tattoo on your consciousness. Living prosperously is ultimately about obtaining the consciousness from and through which substance can flow. So we're about that business of attaining the consciousness from and through which substance can flow. Let us know that prosperity is a divine idea that lives in us. It's not out there. We don't have to wait for it to come to us. It lives in us and comes from us. Tattoo on your consciousness. So living prosperously becomes our reality when we practice these principles that we're talking about this month. Becomes our reality when we activate the divine laws that cover prosperity. And we have this little sidebar that we talked about, I think, a couple of weeks ago. From my perspective, it's really important as we're obtaining this consciousness that we do a full mind, body, spirit scan and look at what are our core beliefs, conscious or unconscious. What are our core beliefs that stand between us and our good? What is it that keeps us from realizing the kingdom is ours and the kingdom is at hand? It's right here. We're in it. So what is it that prevents us from seeing it? So back to the divine laws that govern prosperity. One of the big ones is called the law of giving and receiving. We talked about how you cannot give without someone receiving, right? It's a simultaneous action, and both are equally essential. What we're talking about is Jim Green's favorite topic, the inlet and the outlet. Gotta have the flow, and the flow ain't flowing if we don't have a receptivity to it, to let it flow from us. And it sure ain't flowing if we're not willing to receive our good. Failure to practice this key law is a major block. Our unwillingness to give out of whatever our fear is, whatever our core belief, our unwillingness to give is a major block to living prosperously. It's what I call standing on our hose. Anybody ever found yourself standing on your hose? And you go, oh, who knew? It's me. It's not what's happening out there, it's me. So the second law is the law of tithing. That subject that's ever so comfortable for all of us to talk about. The law of tithing, the true law of tithing is about giving 10% of our good, which means our time, our talent, and our treasure, giving that to what Fillmore calls God's work. What we say in a little more modern vernacular is giving that to where we are spiritually nourished. So again, creating that inlet and outlet. We are receiving, so we give to from where we receive. There's a better way to say that. So tithing is about a tacit agreement that we are in partnership with Source. We're in partnership with substance. This is a law. Trust me, I know, I've tested it. It's a law that cannot fail. And from my experience, I feel like it is the imperative first step to living prosperously, is finding ways to tithe. We had a lot of group discussion after the service last week about tithing, and it was interesting to hear, people's questions, people's thoughts, and I think one of the things that I heard come up as a big thing is, it's really about trust, right? Because we have to trust that if we are willing to give, that, I'm going to do it again, that we have this supernal vat of good, of substance from which to draw. That supply has no limit. Anybody remember, Reverend Thelma uses this phrase a lot, you can't outgive God. It's an infinite supply. Trust, that's a big one, especially if we're in that spot where we don't feel like the means are meeting the end every month. So it's about trusting the principles that we talk about. It's about trusting the very principle of prosperity. It's about trusting the very principle of substance. And I believe that tithing is vital to kicking open that door to prosperous living. I also believe that consistently keeping that practice is vital. As I explained last week, after I tithed for quite a period of time, I spent quite some time messing with it. And you can just shortcut that. That doesn't work. So what I said last week, we read in the law from Fillmore that it is a 10% giving of your good to God's work. What I've learned over the years in teaching many prosperity courses is that people will sign a commitment form that they're willing to give 10%. And unless we have people living on very low incomes, I know that people don't always give 10%. So what feels in integrity, choosing a percentage. What can I live with? What am I willing to do right now? How much do I trust? That's really the question. Do I trust it all the way up to 10%? Or do I trust it at 3%? What's your gut tell you? And what can you consistently live with? One of the other things that we talked about in the group last week is something that I've gotten repeatedly in meditation downloads when I'm standing on the cliff of something big in my life, like choosing to tithe. All I'm asking you to do is trust. Is that so much skin off our noses? Just trust Spirit. Trust Source. Trust God. Then the other thing that I get in meditation frequently is all I'm asking you to do is take the first step. It might be writing a check. It might be filling out an auto tithe form. It might be making a commitment somewhere in our life that feeds us spiritually. Now that we have that foundation reviewed, the highlights of it, we're at our third step, which is about gratitude. Now, as I often say when we're talking about some of these principles, they can really be easily misunderstood, and I think gratitude is way underestimated. It took me several years on my prosperity trek to understand the place that gratitude has in the puzzle. Thanks to Reverend Jim Rosemergy, some of us know that name. He's been in Unity ministry for, he'd be going on like 40 some years now. He taught a class at Unity Village called Prosperity, and it was 2001. I still have the notes in my book. In that class, I finally grasped that piece. I knew something was missing. I knew I hadn't hit on something, but I hadn't been able to identify what it was. So 16 years after taking that class, this is the story that sticks in my mind. Jim, at the time, lived in a rural area, and he took himself on a walk every day, and on his route was a field in which lived a pony. And he noticed one year, as the seasons were changing, that this pony was getting this thick, warm coat. So, and he used to stop and visit, with the pony on his walk. And so one day he stopped and he looked at the pony and he said, "Where'd you get that coat?" And he said, the pony looked at him and telepathically said, "Where do you think? Where'd you get that coat?" Huge bells went off in my consciousness. What do I have? What comes to me with such ease and grace that I completely overlook it? That I just don't even count it on my prosperity scale. I mean, I was sitting in class, it's the proverbial bonk to the head. I'd spent all these years, living by the skin of my teeth. My means did not meet the end every month. And I had spent all these years thinking about what I lacked, looking at what was out there, looking at what other people have, and wanting that. Not looking within, not looking at my life and my good. So for all those years I had been pacing my field wondering where my coat would come from. Anybody live like that? Anybody used to live like that? Where's my coat going to come from? And really, because I was uncovering core beliefs at the time, I didn't even really believe there was enough coat to go around. I didn't know about that word supernal. So where's my coat going to come from? Now, do you think that pony gave any thought to his coat? Do you think he's watching the calendar going, almost November 1st, I'm going to be needing that coat? Do you think that pony got his coat from out there? Nobody came along and gave that pony his coat. It was within. Prosperity is an inside-out job. Have I said that enough times? So that inexhaustible, always available, infinite supply actually responds to our trust, to our faith in source, life, love, law, substance, mind, principle, and it responds to our demands on it. I'm going to be needing that coat. That gives a whole new meaning. This, I think it's a fairly familiar scripture. It's in the book of Matthew, and it's in chapter 6. So, Jesus is kind of, he's on a roll. He's doing a lot of preaching, teaching here, and he's talking to the disciples and some other folks that are gathered. And he says, let's see, where should we start here? Therefore, I tell you, anybody know this one? Do not worry about your life. Do not worry about what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Don't worry about that winter coat. Seriously. Is not life more than food, the body more than clothing? Yes, I think we know that. And then he goes on to say, look at the birds. Anybody ever watched a bird and seen the fret and the worry and the consternation about where their feathers were going to come from or where their next meal was going to come from. And he says, oh, this is a good one. And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life? I would bet that science shows us that worrying actually deducts hours from our life, yes? Because that shows up in a physical way. I think I've said before, my mother used to tell me that her mother used to say, don't tell me worrying doesn't work. Everything I worried about never happened. And he says, why do you worry about clothing? He said, look at the flowers. Have you ever looked at a flower? Look at those beautiful orchids in our foyer. Do you ever walk by those orchids and think, man, they look really worried about where the next bloom is going to come from, about where their moisture, where their food will come from? So basically, Jesus is saying, for crying out loud, get a clue. The pony's coat, the bird's feathers, the flowers' awesome beauty just shows up. And it comes out of the seed, doesn't it? It comes out of the seed, I believe, of gratitude. In fact, I remember, Kate, I was thinking about you because when I came home from that class, from that week at Unity Village, I called Kate and said, I have the golden key to prosperity. And had her come over so I could run through my notes with her. I was so pumped about it. And in doing my research on this topic, I probably have known this before, and I forget what I know, and then I make this lovely new discovery, which is always exciting. Like Bill says, for a goldfish, it's a new day every day, right? So in doing my research, I found out that neither Charles Fillmore nor Mrs. Fillmore, or the other early New Thought writers, I couldn't find stuff on gratitude. I think that's very weird, and I think they missed the boat. However, Reverend Eric Butterworth, who was a Unity minister for about 150 years, wrote this book called Spiritual Economics, and he nailed it. It's chapter 5, well worn. It's my very favorite chapter on gratitude. All of us are familiar with that phrase, attitude of gratitude, right? I think that concept, attitude of gratitude, is just the very tip of a profound iceberg. How many of us were taught, I watch people teaching my grandchildren, how many people were taught to be grateful or thankful for what we receive? I mean, you watch people with their little ones going, what do you say? You know, what do you say for a compliment? What do you say for when someone hands you something or give you something? And that's a good thing. I'm certainly not dismissing those social skills. But the real deal about gratitude is, once again, it's an inside-out job. Gratitude is that consciousness. It's tied so closely to that consciousness that we are the flow. And how we activate this energy, it is an energy, it's a causative energy, Butterworth tells us. First time I'd ever read that. I first read this book in 2007, just 10 years ago. Gratitude is a causative energy, and it's how we activate that energy that makes all the difference. I think it's often overlooked in the prosperity process. Would you have pulled gratitude up as one of the keys? So I quote Eric Butterworth quoting Meister Eckhart. Butterworth is talking about, will God be disturbed if we don't give thanks. Will God lose any sleep over that? And then he says, it doesn't make any difference to God whether we give thanks or not. Meister Eckhart said, I never give thanks to God for loving me because God, and I'm paraphrasing, because God can't help itself. Whether it would or not, it is God's nature to love. So Butterworth says, gratitude isn't for God. We're not obligated to thank God for our food, for our job, for our coat, for our food, for our good. And he says, however, giving thanks is an important state of our consciousness that keeps us in an awareness of oneness with the divine flow. Yes? It's a causative energy that goes before us, and it keeps us in a state of oneness, synchronicity with divine flow. And Butterworth says, when you understand this, you see that a grateful heart doesn't need something to be grateful for. That's a huge key in gratitude. A grateful heart doesn't need something to be grateful for. So gratitude isn't about waiting until our good manifests. It isn't about waiting for the truckload of money to fall into our bank account before we start tithing. It's about flat out being grateful. It's flat out about being that energy, moving that energy of gratitude into our realm. Just talking about living with a grateful heart, right here, right now. It's an energy that we stir up. And what gratitude does, we talked about the flowers and the birds and the pony's coat. So what gratitude does is prepares our field of consciousness. It's like gratitude activates the seeds of substance as divine ideas that come expressed. Gratitude is a spiritual practice that connects us to source and connects us to substance. And it kicks open the door, trust me, kicks open the door to manifesting good. It's a celebration of truth. That's what gratitude is. I'm going to close with this thought from Fillmore. I quote Eric Butterworth quoting Charles Fillmore. God is the source of a mighty stream of substance, and you are a tributary of that stream. You are a channel of that expression. Blessing substance, invisible, we can't even see it, not even manifest. Blessing substance increases its flow. If your money supply is low or your purse seems empty, for all the men that carry purses, take it in your hands and bless it. See it filled with living substance ready to become manifest. As you prepare your meals, bless the food with the thought of spiritual substance. When you dress, bless your garments and realize that you are being constantly clothed with God's substance. The more conscious we become of the presence of the living substance, the more it manifests itself for us, and the richer will be the common good of all, not just us, all. Identify yourself with substance. Rejoice in the ever-present, supernal bounty of God. Let's take that into meditation. Gratitude. I don't know if it's true for everyone. When I am calling up or activating the energy of gratitude, for me, I come to the heart space. And I call it living with a grateful heart. Knowing that we know that we know that we know. I am the consciousness. I am the flow of substance. I am the inlet and the outlet through which God's good is received, is distributed, is blessed in my life and in the universe. What I invite this morning is that we open our whole self to this truth, however it lands in us and with us, whatever level we're at in our prosperity consciousness, we open our whole self to a deeper and wider container of understanding, of wisdom, of knowing. We hear the phrase, God will provide. That doesn't work for me. What I prefer is God does provide. Spirit does provide. Source does provide. Substance does provide. Always and in all ways. Be still. Be still and know. I am substance. I am source. I am supply. I am life. I am grateful. Exquisite. And so it is. We'll have another.
Or live on easy street.
Live from head to mouth, or have diamonds at your feet. You might have just a little, or thought you had it all.
But the scales balance out when we meet our Maker's call.
When he hands out the halos, one size fits all. When you get your crown of glory, it won't be big or small. Your stature on earth won't measure your worth. In his eyes, one size fits all. In his eyes, one size fits all.